Today we are going to start with the topic levels of teaching and teaching at memory level. In the previous classes we have tried to understand that due to the complexity of the subject matter which we want to teach and due to variation in the intellectual and cognitive level of the learner and capabilities of the teacher also, teacher has to select between different levels of teaching. We have studied that teaching can be performed at three different levels, that is memory level, understanding level and reflective level. Today we are going to study memory level, teaching at memory level in detail. So as far as any of the level of teaching is concerned or all the different educational and psychological practices are concerned, we know that they are based on certain educational, psychological or philosophical theories. So first of all, we will talk about different theories which form the basis of memory level teaching. In the later part of the lesson, we will also study about what can be the objectives, what kind of content is selected, what methods of teaching are used, and what is the role of teacher and learner in this method of at this level of teaching. As teaching is an interactive process, so we will also discuss what kind of interactive activities take place at memory level teaching. Motivation is very important so that we can make maximum use of any level of teaching. What kind of motivation is required for memory level of teaching and how we can achieve it, that will be studied in this part. Whenever some teaching is done, we have to decide that how successful we have been in teaching. So that way we have to use some evaluation method to decide the success or failure of the method of teaching used. What could be the merits and demerits, and in the end we will also study that how we can improve teaching at memory level, and we would like to make certain suggestions for the improvement of teaching at this level. So let us start with the topic. First of all, we will study about different psychological theories which form the basis. Psychological or philosophical. We have studied that there are numerous theories which have been proposed by different psychologists, educationists, philosophers, and all these theories, they can be divided into four main categories so that we can study them easily. And as far as memory level of teaching is concerned, it is based mainly on the theories of behaviorism. Behaviorism theories, they are dealing with those kinds of behavior which we can see that how they can be modulated or how they can be improved. Because one of the main objective of teaching is that we want to bring in some positive change in the behavior of the learner. As far as behaviorism is concerned, it is based on the work of many different psychologists like Skinner, Pavlov, Watson and Thorndike. So in this portion we will be studying that what different behavioristic theories they form the basis of this level of teaching. Besides this, there is theory of mental faculty, which is also very important for studying this level. Theory of mental faculty or mental discipline, also sometimes it's mentioned as mental discipline. It is one of the oldest theory which was proposed in 18th and 19th century. Main proponent of this theory are Aristotle and Plato. First, we should try to understand that how intelligence is being explained as far as educational theories are concerned. As far as educational theories, intelligence is the capacity to acquire and apply knowledge, and it is also the capacity to reason and valid reason for information. Theory of mental faculty is basically a theory of intelligence. Now, according to this theory, mind is a collection of separate modules which are assigned for various mental tasks. We know that we can do different mental tasks by using our mental capabilities. This theory suggests that there are separate modules which are assigned to various mental tasks. And mind has separate innate functions. That means different areas, they are regulated by different modules. And mind has certain cognitive and perceptual powers also. It can perceive the environment, as well as it has certain way of understanding, or it is having certain cognitive abilities because of which it can perceive the environment. According to this theory, there are 6 separate modules, and these 6 separate modules, they are named as imagination, intuition, perception, memory, will, and reason. Out of this, reason takes the most supreme position as far as various mental tasks are concerned. According to this theory, these all different modules, they can be developed by rigorous training. So this theory suggests two main things. One thing, that for various mental tasks there are separate modules, and namely there are 6 separate modules, and all these modules, they can be developed by rigorous training. So it lays stress on training. Of course, as we study further some more theories, later on different experimental psychologists, they disapproved this theory on the basis that there are no separate independent faculties. But this theory, it lays stress that imagination, intuition, perception, memory, will, and reason, it can be improved by rigorous training. That means through practice, through exercise, through use and reuse, these separate modules can be developed. Another theory which forms the basis of memory level of teaching is theory of apperception. This theory is proposed by Herbert. John Frederick Herbert, he proposed this theory, and we must remember that Herbert is main proponent of memory level of teaching. He has contributed so much to this level of teaching that this is also called as Herbert's memory level of teaching. He has also developed a model for teaching, which we'll study in some later part of the lesson, where he has given detailed steps and syntax which can be very helpful to the teacher for planning the lesson for memory level of teaching. So this is called as the Herbartion theory of apperception. Now before apperception, we must try to understand that what is perception, because this word, it comes from perception. Perception means input. Now input means all the sensory information which we get from environment. We all know that we have got 5 sensory organs, and through these sensory organs we perceive the information about our environment. Whereas apperception, it means attaching meaning to input. That means whatever we are perceiving from environment, whatever information we are gaining through our senses, if we attach some meaning to it, that will be called as apperception. And as the learner, he goes through different experiences in life. He keeps on adding these meanings and storing this information in his mind, which becomes apperceptive mass. So what is apperceptive mass? Apperceptive mass is whole of the person's personal experiences, whatever he has learned through previous experiences, that becomes his apperceptive mass. Whenever he is receiving some new information, then through mental process he makes sense of that idea by assimilating it to the apperceptive mass which he is already having. So basically this theory is based on the concept that learner is not an empty vessel. He is already having certain apperceptive mass which he has gained through experiences in his previous encounters with the perception. So whenever he is gaining some new information or new knowledge, then through mental process he makes sense of that new information by assimilating it to the previously attained mass of experiences or different kind of experiences that he has gained. He assimilates new knowledge with that, and that is how he makes sense of it. There is another German philosopher, Theodor Lippus. He has further explained difference between perception and apperception. According to Lippus, perception is not a conscious process. That means whatever the learner is seeing or perceiving through his environment, that need not to be based on the conscious effort. Whereas apperception is attentive and conscious process. Now what does it mean? It means that the learner may be receiving certain information. He is perceiving them through unconscious effort also. He is not making a conscious effort. Whatever information he is gaining from his environment, that he is receiving unconsciously. But as far as attaching meaning to this information is concerned, for that he needs to be attentive and has to make a conscious effort. So these two information, they tell us that if we can improve the attentiveness of the learner and learner makes conscious effort, then he will be able to memorize more. Otherwise, whatever information he is receiving from his environment, that will be forgotten very soon. Herbert says appreciation is process by which aggregate mass of presentation becomes systematized by accretion of new elements. This means that whatever new information the learner is receiving, if he is receiving them with attention and if he is making a conscious effort, then that new information, it will add to the apperceptive mass and it will keep on synthesizing new elements to it, and that is how his development takes place. And he has also laid stress on this because this process is dependent upon the mental ability of the pupil. So according to Herbert, the teacher must know the mental development of pupil. Why? Because if the teacher is not familiar with the mental development, he will not be able to decide what kind of information is to be transferred to the learner. Because that all information which is being transferred to the learner will be synthesized with the already present apperceptive mass. So if teacher is aware of what information or what knowledge the child is already having, then he can make and encourage the teacher and encourage the learner to make conscious effort so that new information gets synthesized with the previous information. Theory of importance, which is of importance to memory level of teaching, is Thorndike's Connectionism. Thorndike is well-known psychologist. He proposed this theory which is called as Connectionism. And Connectionism word, it is related to formation of bond between stimulus and response. This theory was proposed in mid-20th century, and Thorndike is known for being first educational psychologist because this is the first time that the theories of psychology, they were implemented in the field of education. According to this theory, there is a bond between stimulus and response which is called as learning. So what is learning? Learning is formation a bond between stimulus and response. Stimulus is any change in the environment, and whatever we do against a stimulus, that is called as the reaction. So we can say that stimulus is any change in environment and response is reaction against stimulus. And as this stimulus and response, it is repeated and exercised many times, this bond becomes strong, which is called as learning. If this stimulus and response bond is not repeated, then the forgetting happens or the learning becomes weak. This theory, it is in use in even today's day classroom. So we have seen that when one particular stimulus is fetching the same kind of response and this process is being repeated again and again, then the learning becomes strong. Thorndike proposed different laws for learning, and these laws, they are called as primary laws, secondary laws and subordinate laws. Three primary laws, they are called as law of readiness, law of exercise and law of effect. Three secondary laws, they are laws of primacy, law of intensity and law of recency. And five subordinate laws like law of multiple response, law of set attitude, law of response by analogy and assimilation, law of associative shifting, law of potency of elements. These all laws which are proposed by Thorndike, that forms the theory of connectionism. According to these laws, whenever there is repeat and revise, then the learning will become strong. And the learning will be better if the effect of learning is pleasant. So these three main laws, they are very useful at teaching at memory level. Thorndike's connectionism is a theory of behaviorism. There are other two theories which are related to behaviorism, and they are also very important for understanding memory level of teaching. That is called as theory of conditioning. The meaning of word conditioning is associative learning. There are two theories or two psychologists whose work is considered as theory of conditioning. One is called as the classical conditioning and second is called as the operant conditioning theory. Classical conditioning theory was given by Pavlov, and it is also called as the Pavlovian theory of conditioning. Pavlov did some experiment with animal subjects, and whatever he found, that is equally useful for human subjects too. There is very important and very well-known experiment conducted by Pavlov, that is called as the Pavlov's dog experiment. This experiment or the result of this experiment is used to explain pairing between stimulus and response. There are certain natural responses which are produced against the stimulus. For example, whenever a dog sees tasty food, then his mouth produces saliva, which is a natural stimulus. But we can attach some artificial stimulus to food, to which the dog can be conditioned to produce the same response. For example, if with the food bell is rung and this stimulus is repeated many times and saliva is produced in the mouth, then actually we are combining two stimuluses, that is food and bell together, so that a natural response of producing saliva is seen. But in the later stages, when food is removed and only bell is rung, even then the dog produces saliva in the mouth. That means the response has been attached to an artificial stimulus. Otherwise, in natural circumstances, dog doesn't produce saliva with the ringing of bell. Such kind of responses which are attached with the artificial stimulus, they are called as conditioned response, or we can say that we have conditioned the dog to a stimulus. Operant conditioning theory that was given by Skinner. According to Skinner, the learning cannot be as simple as just pairing of stimulus and response. And he proposed about role of reinforcement and punishment in forming stimulus and response bond. Here the meaning of operant is modification in the behavior. Whatever behavior we want to modify, that can be done by reinforcement or by punishment. According to conditioning theory of behaviorism, reinforcement and punishment can be done by two ways, either by adding the stimulus or by removing the stimulus. If we add stimulus, then it will be called as positive. If we are removing the stimulus, then it will be called as negative. So we should understand that here positive word doesn't mean always good and negative always doesn't mean bad, because here we will be talking about positive reinforcement and positive punishment. So how the punishment can be positive? When we are giving the punishment to increase the behavior which we want to see. Let us take the examples here. For example, adding the stimulus. If the stimulus is pleasant, then it will increase the behavior. For example, we can take that if we are giving something to the child which the child likes to have, which he enjoys, whenever he is showing some positive behavior, then the tendency of showing that positive behavior will increase. We all know that children, they like to play with the toys. So if giving of a toy is attached to his showing of good behavior or discipline or obedience, then child will attach this positive stimulus with the desired behavior and tendency of showing that behavior will be increased. Whereas in this case, that is adding positive stimulus to punishment, the positive stimulus here, it should be that we are adding a stimulus but which the child doesn't like. For example, we want the child to be showing good behavior. So whenever he is showing bad behavior, if we shout at him or if we give him spanking, then the child doesn't like spanking, and because to avoid spanking, he may stop showing that aversive behavior. So tendency of showing that aversive behavior will be less. Similarly, by removing the stimulus also, we can cause reinforcement and punishment. For this example of reinforcement, by removing the stimulus, we can take example of removing certain restrictions whenever he is following the rules. For example, you may say that if the child is doing some work which you want the behavior to be repeated, and with that you can remove certain restrictions which have been placed on him, then that will be removing the stimulus to increase the behavior. Similarly, if you remove pleasant stimulus, then that will be considered as punishment and that will decrease the behavior. So that means whenever a positive stimulus is considered, then we are adding the stimulus. When we are talking about negative stimulus, then we are removing the stimulus. If something pleasant is added, then the behavior increases. And if something bad is added, then that is considered as aversive behavior and behavior decreases. So this is how we can increase the behavior and we can form better association of stimulus and response, and this theory is called as theory of operant conditioning. So all these theories, they are related to memory level of teaching. Out of these theories, what we can learn is that teaching at memory level can be improved if teacher is fully aware of the mental development of the child, if teacher can attach meaning to the input, if the learner is attentive and he is consciously trying to learn the material, if we can form the connection between stimulus and response and we can exercise it, then the bond between stimulus and response will be strengthened. And we can also make use of punishment and reinforcement so that the positive behavior can be strengthened and negative behavior can be eradicated. So these all theories, they make the basis of memory level of teaching. In the next class, we will study about the other parts, that is objective content and so on.